And welcome back to Radio Free Raffert's continuation of our interviews. Today's interview, we're actually speaking with a tree expert and biologist from Virginia Tech. Dr. John Seiler joins me here this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get into the meat and potato of things, let's kind of give an insight of what kind of goes back, what your job entitles, and kind of a little description of what the physiology and the specialists actually mean.
Yeah, I work in the area of forest ecophysiology, and that's kind of a big word, but I study what processes in the trees allow them to grow in certain areas and respond certain ways. Like in the past, I've looked at how air pollution impacts trees. And when I say impacts, people measure like growth goes down. I look at like what might happen. So in short, I'm kind of a tree doctor, so I look at, oh, photosynthetic rate went down. That's kind of like, oh, your blood pressure's low, right? Or, oh, transpiration rate is too high. And that, that's like, oh, you're burning too much sugar. So I look at the reason behind how trees respond to things. And the whole fall color thing, I don't actually do research in that, but over the years of 35 years I go out in labs teaching tree identification, one of the classes I teach, and we visit the same locations over and over the same time every year, twice a year. So I get a really good feel for, hey, that exact sugar maple last year was orange on this date, and this year it's brown. Okay, and so literally at like this parking lot at Pandapis Pond, I'm always there at that exact date because of classes I teach. And so over the years, I've just developed a good, we'll call it an educated feel versus an educated guess for how well trees are going to do in various years.
All righty, pretty interesting to hear about that. And actually, I've never even heard of the specimen of what you did. Actually, I've never even heard of this type of thing. But I'm like, well, this is kind of cool. So
Yeah,
I with that too. All righty. So obviously, we're going to get right to things here too. Of course, here we are about, I guess, 2 weeks now, roughly into fall at this point now. A lot of people are probably wondering, of course, what goes in the process when we see the photosynthesis and photosynthetics of the changing of the colors of the trees.
yeah, this is an interesting time of year because it always gets people's attention, because and people wait for it and they remember events in their lives based on, oh, that was in the fall because I remember the trees and that sort of a thing. Well, it's actually not too difficult to understand. The yellow and the orange pigments that you see, so let's picture a yellow tree like a hickory. They always turn yellow. The yellow pigment has been there the entire growing season. So middle of June, the leaves are green. The yellow is there. And it's got a role to play in the leaf. And why you don't see it, this is the best analogy for that people can understand. It's like Bob Ross, the painter. He squeezes one drop of yellow paint on his palette. And then he squeezes an entire tube of green on the palette. He mixes that up. You're not at all going to see yellow. That green is not even going to turn slightly yellow green. But then if you had a magic light that you shined on the paint that destroyed the green chemical, it's just a chemical that looks green to our eyeballs. It just destroys the green and it's clear. You're going to see bright yellow spread evenly on the palette because you can take one drop and pretty much spread it and cover the whole palette. And that's what's going on. And so when the day lengths then get short, which they do every year at the same time, the chlorophyll starts breaking down. And that's the green pigment. And then the yellows are revealed in some of the oranges. So it's a kind of a blend from yellow to orange that will appear. And it's been there the whole year, but you just never could see it. And the other thing that is important to remember is that day length is the main trigger in all of this. And that is a great design because if you relied on cold weather, trees would get all messed up. Warm falls, they'd be sitting there green and happy, and then bam, a frost would, they'd be hurt. Other ones, if it gets cold early, they'd be dropping their leaves now. And Now some are, but that we can get that some trees drop early, some drop late. But we'd be way ahead in a cold year and way behind on a warm fall. And so the day length is always the same, basically year in, year out, right? And that's the main signal that causes this to take place. The red pigments are different. And see, you want yellows, oranges, and reds, and then again, using my painting analogy, you can make all kinds of shades, right, if you have those three colors. The reds, though, are not there in the growing season. They form in the fall. And they form when the short days signal that. And they form in greater intensity when it's nice and moist. So the trees are not under stress of any kind, like drought stress. And they form when there's bright daylight. Researchers actually believe they kind of act as a sunscreen, protecting the trees as they're removing nutrients from their leaves. But so if we have a dry year, you can get less red. And the painting analogy really works. If I'm only going to give you a tiny little cup of red, you can only have so many shades out there, right? And it's just not quite as intense. And then so the reds will be low. And the other thing that droughts can do, it will cause the leaves to come off more quickly and have them go brown more quickly. Last year we were really off because we were in an intense drought still. It didn't even really start raining until November. I mean, it was the drill field here at Virginia Tech was basically dead. And in all my 35 years, I've never seen that. Okay, it was totally dead above ground. And a lot of leaves turned color, but then they went brown very, very quick. And so unless you happen to get out there right at that moment, you have a shorter viewing period. It'd be like an art gallery, only open for an hour. Okay, lots of people miss it versus 2 weeks of good color. So drought will end it quicker as well. Yeah. So that's the basic process. It gives you your yellow, your orange, and your reds, and then of course they all blend up.
Yeah, of course, here at Radford, and of course the parts of the New River Valley, it seems like people always have this tendency. I think you mentioned it recently in an interview that everything happens at the same given time, but of course, is it an amount of process of how the tree? I mean, is it like an alarm clock that just goes off in their head, or they just say, "Hey, I'm ready to change"? How does it kind of work?
Well, they're right in tune with the day length, and then there's actually this would probably be a week's worth of lectures. Okay, the detail here, but the day length, there's pigments in the leaves that it actually can tell the length of the day. This pigment system. And then that sets off a whole series of processes in the plant that cause the chlorophyll to break down and the red to start forming. It causes the leaf abscission zone. That's a zone in the leaf that makes it break off, an abscission zone. So the short days trigger a whole cascading series of physiological processes that result in everything that we see out there. In real brief, there's a lot of growth regulators involved. That's actually sort of analogous to hormones in the animals. Very small amounts of chemicals make these profound changes. Think hormonal effects in the animals, and that's the same thing sort of with trees. And the short days cause those processes to start.
Alrighty, that's very interesting. Of course, I know a lot of people are like, oh, now they know all the scientific research that goes in behind. It's not just, you get this 4 or 5, 3 week window, whatever it is, all of a sudden it's done. Of course, that relates up coming into the next question here. Of course, as we're getting in the heart of fall, what are the days that people can be really eager to get out those nice picture views?
Yeah, well, that even brings us back to the process a little bit. Mm-hmm. For this part of the country, New River Valley primarily, I always start with the end of October. Now that's not my date though. Okay, then because day length's the primary thing, so I start with that, like basically the 31st. And then if it's been really, really dry, I might move it up a little bit. If it's been abseasonally warm, I might back the date off and say, hey, the peak's going to be in the beginning of the first week of November, right? Or if we get a lot of cold weather like we've been getting, I move it up a bit. And so what I've been telling people is, look at my calendar here, yeah, the 24th. the 24th through the 31st. That includes 2 Saturdays in there. And it's important, the trees have no idea it's Saturday, okay? But people, of course, right? But people get out on Saturdays, right, and Sundays. So they always want to know the peak weekend. And I'm always like, well, it might be on a Wednesday, the actual peak. But I think 24th, 31st, we're going to have a lot of good color out there. And what's kind of unique to this area is just pick a place to go that there's a lot of ups and downs in elevation. There's a lot of winding around to north sides of the mountains, south sides of the mountains. Like the Blue Ridge Parkways, it's hard to really beat that, honestly. But Route 460 is really good as well, driving towards West Virginia. You want ups and downs and easts and wests. And that changes the tree species. We have a really high diversity of tree species here, more than up in New England, which is like famous for this. So if it's not quite good, wait till you like round the bend and go up a little bit, and you'll pick up good color. We've got a very big mosaic of it here in this part of the country.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, right along the Appalachian Mountains as well, you have a whole spine of trees that go way up to the New England, even Canada, and down south. But you get all that spectacular views at this point. Now, of course, as other parts of the country, so how does it kind of relate to where if you're in the middle, let's say the Rocky Mountains, and you're here in Southwest Virginia, now do all have the same tree species mixed in with it, or is it just kind of a different blend?
No, it's completely different blends. Trees have distributions, and there's very few trees in the West that are the same as here in the East. Then in the East, like you can go probably as far up as maybe central New York, and you might still have 70% of the same tree species as here, but they start dropping out primarily north and south. And then also east-west, the big thing that really changes it is the Great Plains. A lot of tree distributions in the east simply don't get past that. I have a class where I show this over and over again, where trees are found, and they sometimes think it's the Mississippi River blocking it. And it's not that. It has to be a bigger barrier than that. But a lot of trees stop at the Great Plains. And it's mainly weather factors, again, that relate to it. And so Western trees are different than here. And different parts of the country have their favorite trees. Like out in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, for example, your trembling aspen, almost always on a calendar. The yellow trees in the mountains, those are trembling aspen. Up in New England, they don't have anywhere near as the diversity that we have, but what they have there is sugar maple and northern red oak. And then a lot of evergreens that don't change. You might think, well, that's a bummer. Nah, that adds a really neat contrast. It's almost this mosaic of a black almost. It's such dark green. And so that actually adds a nice texture feel to the whole thing. And we don't have large amounts of conifer stands here. We have some, but not like up there. And then different parts of the country kind of get known for that. Yeah, people in the mountains and out west are looking for aspen stands and a few maple species. We have some of the highest tree diversity in North America here, in the Appalachian Mountains, which again gives us great fall color.
Alrighty, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Of course, I've got some folks I know out towards the west. They're always asking, is this tree different from this tree? What makes it different, special from a tree in yours? So hopefully that answers the question, as many people are listening to this too.
Yeah, we can have related trees. Like we have a tree called big tooth aspen here, and they have trembling aspen out there, and there's just subtle differences in it,
Yeah. And of course, that's pretty interesting there. And another thing we always like to see, and people like to take pictures, so shrubberies and some of the bushes as well, they also have an aspect of that. How does that go into factor then changing this upcoming fall?
Yeah, that's you get to enjoy them if you get out and hike. That's more or less, that's not so much the car drive, but if you get out and hike, we've got a lot of understory shrubs. Witch hazel turns a brilliant yellow, dogwood turns red, a deep, almost a hokey maroon color. We have a tree called spice bush that's almost at its peak right now. It's one early. And if you're out hiking and you see bright yellow leaves right now in shrubs, those are spice bush. That's a fun one. You'll know you have it. Grab a yellow leaf and crush it in your hand. And if it smells really, really spicy, you got you got spice bush. Yeah. So driving around though, if you're doing one of the car drives up in the Blue Ridge Mountain, it's mainly the overstory you're looking at. You stop at an overlook and do some hiking, then you can start picking up some of these shrub species, and they go through the same processes.
All right. Yeah, that is very unique to see that. And a lot of people probably didn't even know that the shrub had a little bit effect. But of course, the main focus is when you're going up the Parkway and Appalachian Mountains, Route 460, wherever it may be, you're going to get this
Yeah.
spectacular viewpoint as well. All righty. And of course, is there anything else that maybe people are maybe itching to get out this weekend you could tell them to do?
Uh, what I always tell people is we always have good fall color. And some years are a little better and some years are a little less, but people will be like, oh, it's just horrible. Mainly it's out there if you're willing to go. What becomes a bad fall color year largely is when it's been raining on the peak weekends and no one went. And then it also ends it sooner, knocks the leaves off. If we get, like a hurricane remnant, something like that, it'll kind of end it. It'll take the leaves down. And there was color in them, but no one goes out on a dark, gloomy, drizzly day with the wipers going, right? And then you don't want to hike either. So then they kind of get tagged as a bad color year. But there's going to be good. There were good trees last year, and it was one of the most brutally dry years I can remember. So I encourage people, get out and enjoy it, and you'll find them if you hunt for them.
Absolutely. So, of course, this weekend we have a little rain moving in. May not be the best week, but of course, during the week that we got these seasonably temperatures, like you said earlier, the cold has been perfectly timing out, and the way we've been getting the amount of daylight will be soon getting darker earlier. So maybe people will take into that as well. So
soil moistures are in really good shape, and so I think this is going to be it's set up to be a really good year.
All right. Absolutely. Dr. Seiler, thank you for making some time today. And of course, like I said, I'm sure you're very popular around this time of year. Everybody wants to know the real answers of leaf changings.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All righty. Thank you for that. And stick around for much more content coming up here in just a few minutes. We'll have much more Radio Free Radford. Be sure to follow us there, and we'll be sure to tag all these important and scientific terms here in the description as well. Have a great day, folks.